Hello and welcome to the first Let's Grill Jon in a couple of months, maybe more. I'm Phil Makepeace, this is John Mackenzie. John, how are we on this fine, windy Saturday?
I am sincerely undercooked through lack of grilling.
Oh, that's a shame. We seem to have come to the party in the same... You can't see this, but I'm wearing a grey jumper too.
Grey is very much the mood at the moment, I think.
Yeah, mine is Detroit Red Wings.
NHL
jumper. Yeah, I support all the Detroit teams because I am, as ever, faithful to the restorative power of sport in a city. So, yeah.
A failed automobile city industry complex.
Something like that. Yeah, so I support all the Detroit American teams.
It's very hipster though, isn't it, Detroit?
I've never been. Have you been?
I've never been, no. But I believe it is hipster.
Just going to move my camera because there's absolutely no reason it should be up there where it is. Okay, so we're going to look at your game from Tuesday night, or was it Wednesday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday, where you won for the first time in your brief but flaily career.
Florid, I like to say.
Yeah, so we're going to have a look at this, and as we go along, there'll be bits where John hasn't played the best move, and we'll challenge him to find the best ones. But generally,
surely not.
Generally, it's going to be a celebration of John's first ever win. Okay, so we have a Sicilian. Well, E6. This move can be a lot of names. It can be the Scheveningen or the Khan. It can lead into lots of different lines. So yeah, D4 absolutely. Let's play the normal kind of Sicilian-y things. And yeah, A6 I think is the calling card of the Khan variation, Kan. Not I think it's different from the different spelling from the Karo Khan. I'm not entirely sure who Mr. or Ms. Khan was. Was there a Khan dynasty, or was that in China, or is that a Han? Is it something different?
Yeah, there's definitely a Han dynasty.
Han, yeah, not sure about Khan. Anyway, everything you did here seems very reasonable. So
I just did the standard opening.
But that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's like if you know roughly what you're doing in a particular opening, then it's a thing where you're going to know what you're doing in a variation of it reasonably. Anyway, I mean, especially in these lines where black isn't really challenging your centre in any way. They're just setting up very, very quietly and very slowly. So yeah, knight c3, queen c7, bishop e3, knight c6. All of this stuff is completely reasonable. Okay, I'm not 100% about your next move, and then I'd like you to tell me why I might not be so thrilled with you taking this knight. Why? Which black piece is going to be struggling in this particular variation based on where the pawns have ended up?
The white squared bishop?
Yeah, so when you take this knight, you are giving this bishop a free move, really, because they're going to take back with the pawn. Not only does that pawn now look at the d5 square, which is always a good thing for black to be doing in the Sicilian, but yeah, this bishop might be able to come now to the b7 square, pawn up, and then suddenly this bishop looks forever down this long diagonal. So it's not a disaster by any stretch of the imagination, but you have given black a little bit of a free move. You don't really want to be making moves which encourage your opponent's pieces into the game. So what might be an alternative here?
I'm just trying to think about what I thought about here. I can't even remember what my logic was, other than this guy's a lot stronger than me as a player, so maybe.
Well, maybe just treat this position as a new position and try and just work out something now.
Yeah. I guess moving out the light squared bishop and making it possible for me to castle. I guess that's eventually what I did anyway. But
yeah, so either of these squares is good for the bishop to go to. Anything else? Any other candidate moves?
I'm not sure.
No? Okay, so which side of the board do we want to castle on? Are we definitely castling kingside, or could we castle queenside as well?
Yeah, I guess we could.
It might be an option, yeah. I think it's likely that black is going to castle kingside, so if we did do that, then we'd have to then be prepared for stuff being chucked at us. But yeah, I think I've had this position before, and I've played just queen d2, and it's a way of just encouraging a rook to the file it probably wants to be on in the first place. And you're not necessarily going to castle, but you also definitely can. And it's fine. It's a line. But if you're more comfortable with castling kingside, there's absolutely no reason you shouldn't. So yeah, bishop e2 or bishop d3 would also have been absolutely fine. Yeah, I'm just not so convinced by this move, because yeah, as I said, black's main idea in Sicilian, especially in a line where they played e6, is to get d5 in, and you are helping them doing that with this. Okay, bishop c4. Slightly unusual square for the bishop. Why might that be?
Well, I guess I put it there because I felt like it was looking down that diagonal line, and the only way that it was going to get attacked was down the d file by that pawn.
Yeah, I mean, you're actually encouraging this. This is the issue. You're putting it on a square where when d5 happens, that's not d5, that's d5. When d5 happens, the bishop is going to have to move somewhere immediately. It might belong on b3, but I don't think, again, you're making it easy here for black. You're giving them tempo to do something with. So again, I think bishop d3 or bishop e2, these are the best squares for this bishop. It just sort of sits there, and its main function is to get out of the way for castling, to be honest with you. Which is, I mean, ideally you want to do both. You want to have it so that the bishop's doing something as well. But here, yeah, the bishop really should just be getting out of the way. So bishop c4 just presents it as a target. Black can play d5 here immediately, and then, I mean, this is the problem when you have in the Sicilian, like, I can't remember who it was. Someone said that playing d4 in the Sicilian is just a mistake, because what you're doing is you're offering a swap of a central pawn for a peripheral pawn. So black automatically ends up with 2 versus 1 in the centre. And you can see the problem you get here, where really it's now, if you're going to include the c pawn, it's now 3 versus 2. And yeah, so d5 here was definitely possible, and then bishop probably has to go back, and black just gets a very easy game where their pieces just come to very natural squares. They castle, and then it's hard for you to do stuff because you haven't got that much central control. So yeah, okay, so bishop f6, knight f6 was played. Bishop b3 came anyway, which is fine. Puts the bishop on blunts the b file and puts the bishop on a protected square, so that's not a bad decision. Bishop b4, and then queen d3. Yuck. Why did the queen go to d3? I know you were scared of this. I know you're scared of knight takes e4, and quite rightly. But I think there are far better ways of getting out of the pin or avoiding the pawn being captured than to put the queen on d3. Why do I find this d3 square so offensive for the queen, based on what we've talked about so far?
Because you're using it to defend a pawn, and they've got plenty of pawns over to attack anyway.
Yeah, there's another reason. Think about their light squared bishop. What else about that light squared bishop means that the queen is just a target here?
Well, I guess the queen's on a light square now. So
yeah, so what could black do to take advantage of it being on that square in particular?
Push Oh yeah, use it to prevent the castle.
Yeah. So what is black playing? Yeah.
Push the A pawn and then stick it on A6.
And then suddenly, I've recently discovered gold colour on there, so I'm going to use that for big ones this time. Yeah, it's just a problem where not only does the bishop look down this diagonal, the queen's going to have to move again, but there might also be a rook in behind. If you don't manage to castle before this happens, let's say A5 happens and then you castle, then this is now a skewer and it's absolutely filthy. If you cast, I don't know what else there is available here. There's no good way to stop this bishop coming to A6. If you try bishop C4, then D5 just happens again, and we have the thing where the bishop just has to go back, and then the bishop comes here. It's all a bit clumsy, John. It's just not quite. And you're correct as well that the queen's a bit overworked on that square. So what might be a better way here to get rid of the pin and or defend this pawn?
Well, I guess the only thing I could think of was pushing the F pawn, but I'm always told off whenever I do that, so I didn't do it.
Okay, F3 in this case, in the Sicilian, it's generally okay because you can set up on the, you get a good sort of light square pawn chain, and then the queen and the bishop sit here in amongst it. In this case, we need to get on with things because this is coming quickly, so we can't really like fanny around here. We need to get rid of pieces and make sure that we can do stuff. So
presumably just attack the bishop on the b file.
So A3, and then this is it. So takes, and then if knight takes E4, what have you got at the end of this line that means that this is okay? Just about. What have you gained so far? The bishop's come off for the knight, so you've got the bishop pair. So actually this pawn disappearing means that the position is more open, and that might be a good thing. But there's a particular move here you have that's just going to immediately take advantage of the fact that this knight is now unprotected. It's not a winning move, but it's a nice way of continuing. I do like his this guy's name, by the way. You know who Labordonnais was?
No.
No, he was one of like the original pros from like the 1850s, the French player. So I'm assuming this guy's Donald A something. But yeah, Labordonnais.
He actually wasn't called that.
Was he called Paul?
He was called Peter, actually.
Peter, that's a disgrace. Anyway, what move can you see here that's dealing with black's pieces that are unprotected? So you've got this guy.
I guess I could attack with my queen on G4.
You got G4, and then we've got this fork.
Yeah.
There's only one good way for black to defend both, which is
moving the queen to E5.
Good. And then how can you continue your attack?
Presumably by putting pressure on the queen.
With?
The bishop.
D4. Skewer up to the top. And there's this weird and cute little line here where both queens are going to come off. So knight F6 check. Takes, and you get your pawn back. And then whoops, that's not where the rook should go. Rook there, and then the bishop can hair back. And this is fine. You're doing absolutely fine here. Yeah, so the advantages you get from having the bishop pair often mean that taking hot pawns like this is not necessarily the best thing to do. And in this position, yeah, we can target both of the pieces, the only two black pieces that haven't got any protection. When I'm talking about pieces with no protection, you can generally ignore the queens and rooks, but yeah, the little ones that we can go after easily. So yeah, A3 would have been a bit better than queen D3, but happily your opponent did not play A5, otherwise you would have been in a lot of trouble. But they still have a very decent position here, and they've pretty much got this A5 bishop A6 idea to play at their leisure. Black castled, and so did you. D5. What were you thinking at this point?
I mean, I knew I was in trouble anyway at this point. So I thought about leaving the tension there, but then I thought I'm going to end up losing tempo. He's probably just going to take that pawn anyway, so I just figured it was better to swap off and then at least see where I could go from there.
The disadvantage you have is a space one rather than material. This bishop is not great, but they still, unless black plays a5, this bishop is also not going to be a great piece. The dark square bishops, yours one is on its absolutely ideal square, and these knights are roughly equivalent. So if you can just hoover off enough so that you can gain a little bit more space and do things in such a way that you're not... I mean, if I had this position as white, I'd be really feeling quite claustrophobic. Like, it's just not a position you really should be having with white, because with white you want to be a bit more expansive. And yeah, the reason for this, as I say, is just don't capture on c6 if you don't have to. There's absolutely no need here. So yeah, taking the pawn, fine here. And then I really like your next move. By the way, this was absolutely not a good move to play.
In my analysis, it swung a lot with that pawn take.
What black?
I'm guessing he should have taken with his knight.
Well, no. If you take with the knight, then I think you just get the opportunity to hoover off even more pieces and gain even more space. So something like this, and then you can play a move like c4 to really just start making your own waves in the game. No, the best move here. Let's have a look at c takes as well. C takes is good. Why is c takes better than e takes? It's not so obvious, but there is a...
because eventually I end up having a clear pass to the king, right? So,
well, it's more to do with here. If you take with the e pawn, you're not really helping. The black isn't really helping their pieces. This bishop shouldn't really be coming out in this direction. It should be coming out here. So there's no need to move this pawn out of the way. Also, if you play with this pawn, what black gets is even more blunting of the diagonal that the bishop is on, your bishop. So in the alternative, in the game, there's only two pawns in the way of the king now, whereas here there's three. But also what this pawn chain does is it informs the rest of the game. It informs the directionality of black's play. So here it opens up the queen. We said a5, bishop a6 is coming, and yeah, these are the two open files for black, the ones that they don't have any pawns on, and so it makes sense to put a pawn chain like this that is just going to inform that directionality towards the queen side. So yeah, that's another way. But actually, I think there's another idea here for black which would have been quite difficult to meet, and that's knight g4 with an immediate mate threat on h2. How would you have responded to this?
Well, I did. That threat did come up, didn't it? And
it came up the next move.
Pawn.
Yeah, it came up on the next move, but it was it's different here because it also involves an attack on your bishop. And in a fairly open position like this, it's going to be beneficial to have the bishop pair. Yeah, there's no really good way of dealing with this, unfortunately. So if you play g3 here, well, now actually, because you've opened up these squares for the black bishop, which way should black recapture now?
When you say recapture,
sorry, the pawn.
Yeah, I guess the way that they did.
Yeah, it opens up this possibility because now the bishop has this lovely square on h3 to come to, and it's starting to look a bit ugly for you. But in the game, it takes, and bishop d4, nice move. Might as well start to create some threats of yourself. Now knight g4 doesn't have the same oomph because there's no other reason for it. There's nothing else it's looking at apart from the pawn. So when you play g3 here, you're fine. Black is still a bit better because they've got lots of space and you've opened up some squares, but there's no immediate big problems here for you.
I nearly even missed the threat on of mate here, which is would have been embarrassing. But
yeah, but you didn't. I mean, it's the first thing you should do after every move, especially in a time control like this. I mean, what was encouraging here is we can see you've in the bottom right hand corner of the chessboard there, it tells you the clock times. You spent 14 minutes up to this point. Were you getting 15 seconds a move as well?
Yeah.
So you've played 13 moves, so that's another 3 minutes. You spent 17 minutes so far, and that's all right. That's exactly what you should do when you're. I mean, let's put the position in. Let's put the clock.
Well, I had 8
in.
minutes.
Yeah.
I had 8 minutes at the end, so.
Yeah, you're putting the clock times in. Yeah, up to this point where you made the initial mistake of taking the knight, you spent a reasonable amount of time, 4 minutes, and you spent a couple of minutes on that. But then after that, you can see the clock times just. You're spending a decent amount of time on these moves, and it's encouraging, and that's good. And you spent what? 2.5 minutes on Queen G3. This is okay. It's the right thing to do. There's no point in rushing your opponent in this time control. Okay, Queen G3, Bishop D6. So we've got lots of influence, and that forces our hand. We have to play F4 here. No worries.
This move,
it's just horrible.
It blew my mind.
What is he doing?
I was expecting G5.
G5, wow. I mean, I don't think that's much better. There's absolutely no need here for black to start moving pawns in front of their king. They've got enough piece play. They've got enough stuff going on with the actual structure that they have already. Not to. Let's actually just flip the board. Can I do that on here without causing a ruckus? I can. Right. Play as black here. Briefly. Let's have a look at what you should be doing when you get this kind of attack. So you've got 1, 2, 3. This is possibly helpful. What kind of thing should happen here when black has already forced you to play this pawn forward, so there is some weakness already in the position. What should you do here as black? You don't have to keep things going, but
I mean, I would just start putting pressure on my queen side.
Absolutely. These pieces aren't the happiest, but actually what we can do here as black is probably bring in another piece to start looking around. I mean, there's holes here, there's a weak pawn, there's a loose bishop. I like the move rook to b8 with the idea of churning this rook down the board and starting to really go after things on the king side that way. This is where the weakness is, and this is the bishop that's holding together that entire diagonal. But look, not available, not available, not available, not available, not available.
Yeah. And this proved to be like the issue later on
exactly,
in the game. I was just constantly thinking, where do you put the bishop?
So if black can find a way here of getting rid of the bishop, and I think this does help in that regard, that might not have been so fun for you. So let's flip the board back and just take another look at F5 and marvel at how bad it actually is. Okay, give me 3 reasons why it's bad.
Just stops protecting his king.
1.
It blocks the bishop on the light squares
2.
from defending the knight. And
1 more. When you move a pawn 2 squares, how many squares are you weakening?
3.
More.
2.
1,
4.
2, 3, 4. There's no need. There's no need to move this pawn. I don't know what it's doing. I mean, it's protecting the knight, and it's also having a look at this outpost on e4. But look, I mean, it's just an open goal. And I said earlier on, we don't necessarily need to talk about rooks when we're thinking of pieces that are unprotected, but absolutely we need to think about this rook. This rook needs to go, and you did it, and you found it, and I was so pleased. You played knight takes d5, and suddenly You're the exchange up.
He took ages thinking about that, and I wasn't entirely sure why he still went with it, because it just meant the exchange was going to happen. I just figured you sort of move the...
Where are you supposed to go? The issue you've got is that, okay, you move the queen to a square where it can't be, because you've got this discovery wherever you go.
Yeah, that's
this
true.
is happening. So let's say the queen goes to b7. Well, actually, it's mate in 4. Can you see it? It's a beautiful mate in 4. When I was preparing this, I had a little chuckle to myself. It's a lovely mate in 4.
Well, you've got the discovered attack.
Okay,
so
where are you going to do it? Which square?
I mean, you could do it anywhere, couldn't you? You could even attack that rook in the...
Yeah, but why is it
A8.
better to do... If we're trying to do a forced mate, why is it going to be better to put a knight on one of these two squares?
Making it more claustrophobic.
No, but what about these two squares means? What is it? What's it going to be? Which piece is doing the check?
The bishop. No, the knight. Both pieces.
Double check. Double check. When you've got a double check, the only way of getting out of a double check is to move the king. So it's more forcing than, say, if we move the knight to like b6. Yeah, you can win this rook in the corner. But...
yeah, you could just plonk them.
But yeah, the knight isn't now doing another job around the king. So yeah, knight, if queen b7 for example, then knight e7 check. King has to move into the corner because there's no other way of getting out of a double check. And here it's mate in 3. See if you can spot this. I'll be really pleased if you do. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces in our mating attack. What does that give us the luxury to do?
Sacrifice.
Good. Which piece is actually not really doing a job at the moment?
The queen.
No. The queen will come later on, but which of these pieces is the most disposable?
The knight?
Yeah, good, because the knight is looking at g8, but that's the job the bishop's doing. So our knight...
Oh yeah, I think I thought through this actually, because if you sacrifice the knight on g6,
has to take.
Then you've got that line into the queen from the line into the king from the queen now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where's your mate? And this is just the power of...
Yeah, you just take the knight.
Oh, centralized bishops looking towards the king. Oh, it's beautiful. Oh. Yeah. Sexy chess. If you'd played that, you'd have been dining out on it for years. But he didn't. He took it, and you got the rook in the corner. Right, okay. When you are the exchange up, you obviously have an extra rook for an extra minor piece. In this case, you have this rook for this knight. And it's not so clear that your rook is a better piece than that knight right now. That knight's doing a reasonable job of doing things on the king's side. However, you also have not just the extra exchange, but these 2 extra pawns. And a rook is really, really good at supporting passed pawns, whereas a knight is not. A knight is not very good at defending them because it has A, it takes a while for it to get over to that side of the board, and B, yeah, they're very bad because a knight can't look at any squares immediately around it. A knight blocking a passed pawn is just a sitting duck. If you imagine a knight here and your pawn's up here, all it's doing is a blockading job. So your job here is really to make sure that your rook becomes as good a piece as that knight, but also long term, yeah, just chuck this up the board. Bishop e6, unleashing this attack, and you found you just kept going here. You weren't worried about that bishop. You played h3, which is the best move on the board, because it's an exchange. If the rook takes the bishop and you take the knight, it's an exchange. And
that's all I was. From this point onwards, I was like,
brilliant.
Now I just need to swap off pieces really, and clear stuff up, because I just don't trust myself to do anything. I reckon because I was 2 pawns up right in the exchange.
Yeah.
I just figured, like, if I just keep swapping pieces off, I'll eventually get to a point where I'm going to be in a better position than he is.
It's just it's clarity. It's brilliant. So h3, knight f6, and then queen f3. Again, the best move on the board, defending the bishop and thinking about coming in to exchange queens. I love it.
Again, I was like with the bishop. I was like, as long as there's always the option for me to like do something more dangerous, it's going to work out okay. Because then I could just come in and attack the queen with my queen, and then just swap them off, and then I would not only like rescue that bishop anyway, but I'd fancy my chances in that situation as well.
Yeah, it's superb. Okay, black did some of your dirty work here for you, swapping off some pieces.
This was mad because I was worried about my pawn on c2. I just thought the queen would just come down and snaffle it up.
Well, let's have a look at this line. So queen takes c2. What would you do here? This actually helps. This actually helps you.
I guess I would just attack it with the queen.
With the queen, okay. Well, you've got one piece that's not doing anything here.
The rook.
Yeah, I'd just play rook kc1, and just basically treat it like a. I know you've lost your passed pawn, but yeah, the queen doesn't really have many. Practice only has 2 squares. You can either go to d2 or a4.
Yeah.
If you go to d2.
If you get to d2, I probably would have just swapped off the knight with. I don't know, because I was quite tempted to just
start hoovering off. Yeah.
Yeah, I would probably have just swapped off, and then he would probably have taken with the rook.
And then you can start.
And then you've got that backdoor entrance to just sort of start plugging away out.
Yeah, you just activate. Basically, the most important thing here that you've done would have done is make your rook a good piece.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be too worried about the pawn. I mean, the main thing, when you get the exchange down, is your problems when their minor piece becomes a nuisance and your rook is just sitting doing nothing.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be too worried about that. But yeah.
Anyway, when he attacked my bishop, it was just like, well, you've just basically solided up my defense here a little bit for me anyway. Because ideally I would have, if I hadn't have had to protect my bishop on A8, I would probably have moved C3 anyway.
Yeah.
Just because it gives that bishop a bit more defense and like stops pawns from being hoovered up, I suppose.
And then you've got to pass d pawn instead.
Yeah.
Queen a7. And again, a lovely little sort of distracty move here, where you just ignore that bishop and go after something else.
Yeah.
I don't think it's objectively the best, but the plan here is evident, and it's really cool to see that you're like the worst thing I find with my students is when I think I'd always rather have them playing slightly off-piste moves as part of a plan than objectively the best moves when they have no idea what they're doing. And always rather have that the right way around, because planning is such a big thing. And yeah, queen e3 just does 2 jobs, defends it and attacks that bishop.
I also thought as well, when I've been in situations before when someone's done that to me and left a sort of piece hanging deep in my own half, you just then start like trying your best to try and win that piece back. And so your plan changes to actually having sort of attacking moves and into this sort of situation where you're angling at just an arbitrary piece. And so I kind of figured with this, I was like, I don't really care about that bishop on a8. I would rather sort of make these moves which solid me up, but also put threats on other parts of his setup, because he's in this weird situation now where he probably should have like defended that bishop with a rook or something and been in relatively the same position. But I guess I figured it was just better to put my like I said, I operated by the principle of like put your pieces on dangerous squares now, get them into better positions to start attacking, and it sort of worked out for me.
Great, it's really, really good. Right, black decided to chuck away their bishop in exchange for this pawn, but it's completely irrelevant. The swap of the light squared bishops just makes it so that you're just crushing now. This rook, your extra rook, is clearly a better piece than this knight. Okay, this knight can jam itself onto outposts, but you've still got an extra pawn. There's a very basic plan of going after this guy, which would mean that you'd have a golden passed pawn on the b file, and yeah, I mean, this is just completely winning. But the way you finished it off was lovely. Right, queen to d3. Very simple. Fork.
Yeah.
A re-centralisation of the queen onto a square where also this knight can't worry you next move. This knight's going to have to go to a light square next, which means that it's not going to be looking at a light square. So it's just it gets rid of all your worries. The best thing you could do now is probably also just plonk your king on h2, for example. Get it out of the way so there's nothing to worry about. Knight d5. I'll have that. Queen b8. And then this was the move that I was really just so proud of you for, because this is position. I basically clocked away for a few minutes to go and do something else, and I came back and this position was on the screen, and I was looking at this going, well, actually there's obviously Jon is completely winning, but there's no clear cut way of doing things. Oh, what about queen a3? We've got the long-term threat of chucking your rook onto a8, and also it makes this pawn completely immune because of what you did next. And it's just another redeployment of the queen onto a better square. It protects b2, it protects the rook, it looks at this rook, and it's just lovely. And one thing I've always noticed actually throughout our Let's Grill Jon sessions is that you've got quite a nice geometric appreciation of things. I think you kind of want to put pieces where they're doing things, where they're active, and this queen is clearly active in a number of ways, and that's something that I've definitely always noticed. Anyway, he fell straight into it, didn't he? And let's have a look at the clock times here. So 9:59, and then what was it? I think it was instant. It wasn't. It was a minute. It was a minute. Okay.
Because I don't know why, but I was just sort of, I don't know. I was just really, at this point, I was like so strong on adrenaline that I was just thinking, I thought through the ramifications of the move like every time, like 5 times, because I was convinced I was going to do something stupid. But it's obviously dead simple, right? Is that the queen is defending the rook, right? And it doesn't matter if you tempt the queen away because you're going to cause problems.
The queen is completely overworked. And yeah, that is it. The queen takes rook, queen takes f8 is mate, and there's no other fruity tactics. You are just a rook and a pawn up. Beautiful. And yeah, we were so pleased for you, and I was watching it along with Mike, your captain, and yeah. So how did it feel?
It's funny because like and this is my experience of playing competition chess, is that I'm just out of my depth for the first 10-15 moves, and I think it's simple. As soon as the position simplifies down, because there's fewer potential moves, I think my improvement curve between like the first 10 moves and then the second 10 moves is just massive, because I start off without enough prep to be able to do anything good position wise, and my issue is really like setting myself up into a good position. But then when I got to a point where I noticed that nice potential for getting the exchange up, and then from that point on I was just sort of taking a couple of minutes or a minute over each move and just thinking, right, what are the issues that I need to deal with, what are the issues that I can cause and solve those issues at the same time. And it just sort of got to this position where I was like, I kind of feel okay about this. There's nothing that I need to worry about. There's no threats. It's just a case of like slowly working things into this situation where, I mean, my plan was obviously eventually to just swap everything off on that back line, because it was just, the king was so exposed on that back line and it would have been fine. So yeah, I guess I would have just like again, if he'd not attacked with that knight, I would have thrown my rook across to a1. Exactly. And then just started swapping things off until he ends up skewered on the back line.
I mean, it's no different from anything really. If you feel just comfortable in where you are in your environment and in a particular position, then it just makes everything so much easier. You don't have to sweat it at all.
Well, I just think I need to work so much harder on my opening stuff, because like I did no prep for this game. I hadn't played an over the board proper game of Classical with a decent time control for probably 2 or 3 months. which is like a bit shonky, really, obviously. But I think that's where it shows up. I think I've got an okay understanding of like tactics and stuff because of the stuff that we do all the time, and because I do puzzles. But so much of it is just getting myself into a position where I can start playing to my strengths. And I was just lucky that this guy made some terrible moves early on, so that I was still in the game by the time that I could start actually kicking in.
I think that playing a bit of blitz might not actually be the worst thing for you, because the good thing about blitz is that you'll always have an opening. You won't necessarily have tactics or a middle game or anything, but you're always going to have an opening, and it will sharpen your instincts doing that. And you don't have to care particularly about your blitz rating. Obviously you want to win, but that's something that will help, and it will help you get a lot of volume of openings and practice in a particular lines that you want to have a go at. So I know you don't play a lot of blitz, and that's to be commended in some respects, but equally it would just give you that volume where you can practice more. Right, are you playing again this week, or is it?
I think I probably need a week off to recover still, but mate, I would be tempted to play again the week after.
Okay.
It's a big commitment as well, isn't it? Like 2 hours on a weekday night.
Yeah.
Especially I'm someone who does like a lot of work in the evenings as well. So, but yeah, it did. That feeling is one that I've not had really before, and I don't know why. Like I've played 4NCL before, and I over the board in person, and like I think because there's people there and you sort of have to compose yourself, like you just sort of get on with it. I probably just made silly moves, didn't really think about what I was doing that much. Whereas with this one, I just had a bit more time to just sort of, I felt a lot more comfortable doing it online than in person, because I could just sort of like relax myself and just sit there. I've never felt so much adrenaline from like any sport before, and I was absolutely like feeling it for the whole hour and a half, and then that relief when you realise that you're actually in quite a good position by the end. It was quite nice, and like I don't know, I was quite buzzing for like an hour afterwards. It was good.
And people say chess isn't a sport. It is for these moments. Yeah.
Definitely is, yeah.
Good. Well, I hope we're going to have more wins to look at, but equally, we can have a look at some losses as well. Just the more you play, the more you get, and the more we can look at it and analyse, and the more source material we're going to have for your improvement.
It was big for me as well, because like we say, because I've not won before, and like I probably jumped in at the deep end going in so early to 4NCL, because I've only been playing for like probably about 2 years now, if not a year and a half, and I'm playing against people who've played for ages and like know what they're doing, and so to a certain extent I've just sort of felt a little bit of a fraud. But getting a win under my belt, I think, makes a big difference, because I feel as though actually I can get wins if I think about what I'm doing, and if the other person blunders a bit. But
and it's a win against someone very reasonable as well. It's got a rating of 1700, 1750. That's enormous strides from where you were in the spring, where I don't know, you were playing matches and losing to people in the 1400 bracket. So it's just a huge debut win, and hopefully the first of many. Right, other streams, I don't know. I've got some simultaneous exhibitions happening tomorrow, but they are not as part of the chess bit, but I will advertise them on our coaching stream, Make Peace with Chess. I guess, John, we should do another one of these fairly soon. Maybe make this back into a weekly thing, if that's all right with you. Yeah. Blitz album parties, I think I might do one in the week, but yeah, generally the streams and videos and the bonus bits of the Chess Bit podcast will be resuming. Episode 37 has just been released, where John, what do we talk about? We talk about horses and Grand Theft Auto, and there's a bit of mental health chat. What else do we talk about? There's all sorts of nonsense. The Great Escape makes another appearance. But yeah, the Chess Bit is available on all podcast platforms. All that remains for me to do is say thank you to John and congratulations. And we'll see you guys again soon.